Good morning, KINES 55 students and fellow coaches. This week, we are taking another step in this process and of creating our own blueprint for becoming a coach. And I apologize for getting the video and assignment to you guys a day late. We had a real tragic thing happen on our football team this weekend where we lost a player. And as a head coach or as a dad or a parent, losing one of your kids is kind of the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And unfortunately for our football team this year, this is the third player off this team that has passed away this year. So this team that I'm currently coaching has really been through a lot of adversity, and it's a team that's really heavy on the freshman side, and so it's a lot of new life experiences for a lot of these guys. And in times like this, it's really hard, and it's really hard to heal. It's really hard to move forward, but life is like that. When adversity hits us, life doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And so as hard as it is, as a coach, as a leader, as anybody that loses somebody, moving forward is really tough. And but it's really important to be able to do the best you can to do that, because as I mentioned, life keeps going. And although you may be going through the toughest time in your life, everything else around you is still happening. And when something like this happens in the middle of a season, it's really that's the challenge. You've got another team that doesn't know anything about the adversity that your team is facing, and they're preparing for you guys, and you have the rest of the season to continue. And so it's a challenging time for our football team right now. And so again, I apologize for being a day late with this week's work, but yesterday was a pretty tough day. So moving forward to today, as like I just said, I'm going to try to take my own advice here, and this class moves on, and so we need to move on. So last week's assignment and all the assignments leading up to this assignment have been kind of laying the foundation for you to have a solid blueprint and plan when you decide to become a coach. And now that we've completed, our personal coaching philosophy, we've kind of determined what level of coach we want to be. We've talked a little bit about assistant coaches and what types of assistant coaches we would like to have, the support that's needed, the challenges that you may face administratively with all kinds of things. And so you guys have done a really good job for the most part on your assignments of identifying those things and having those already in your mind. And in coaching, whether it's an X's and O's decision or it's just a logistical decision that you make, if it's well thought out and you anticipate potential challenges with whatever that is, you'll be better prepared to take on those challenges when they come. And it might be something, like here's a real simple example of something that may seem totally insignificant. Okay. But when I was coaching at Mendocino College, we played a game at Contra Costa, and it was a long ride home to Ukiah. And so we were planning on having dinner after the game, and we were just going to stop somewhere in Vallejo and eat. And we got to the restaurant and it was closed, and we got to another restaurant and it was closed, and everything was closed in Vallejo by the time our game was over. And so not having a plan or not really thinking like they might close, that left me unprepared in that situation. And it was a challenge that, we had to deal with, and better planning, I would have known, and now I always call ahead. I always make sure that, and unfortunately that's the way we learn things sometimes, by messing them up. And so you're going to do that a lot as a coach, just like you are in life. And so you learn, we go back to Pat Summit and we say there's value in a loss. There's value in coming up short on something or not being ready for something, because you learn from that. And then the next time that happens, you're better prepared for it. And so coaching decisions, there's a lot, and trying to anticipate challenges, not just, with your team meals, but a potential challenge might be, what is the response of your opponent going to be based on the strategy that you're using that game? For example, how are they going to adjust to what you adjusted to that week? And then how are you going to adjust to that? And then how are they going to adjust to that? And the further you can think ahead in coaching and in any of these decisions that you have to make, um, you really are going to get a better perspective, and you're going to be better prepared when those challenges happen, because you've already thought about it, even if it's just for a few seconds, to process what that potential challenge could be. It's in there, it's in your hard drive of your brain, and you're going to respond and react better with a little bit of experience at it. It's practice, and so um, anyway, moving forward now to, we've kind of laid that foundation, and now it's time to get the job. How do you get the job? How do you get a coaching job? Well, we're going to go through that today, and we're going to go through some of the resources and some tips and reminders that I'll give to you about the application, your resume, a cover letter, an interview, and your assignment this week is going to be reflective of that information. So when you're considering applying for a coaching job, there's lots of considerations. When you do that, it might be considering what kind of resources are available for you at that particular job, and how maybe one job could be a better job than another job. Maybe it's the salary. But a couple things that I think are important to keep in mind, and a lot of the other ones will fall into place as a result of that. But having short-term goals as a coach and having long-term goals as a coach, and just like for your team, you've got all these players that have individual goals. All those individual goals should be directed towards smaller group goals, and then those smaller group goals should be in line with the team goals, and then the team goals are all in line with your vision as a head coach and the overall program goals. And when you have a program that's feeding all that to one thing, and that focus stays in one direction, you're going to have a good team. And when those goals stray away from that, those goals as they stack up, when they stray away from the team goals or the small group goals or the overall program goals, that's when you have a problem. And that's when you need to identify those, and you need to reel people back in. But your long-term goals as a coach should be the same way. If your goal is to coach maybe just youth sports in your community, then you're going to approach that, pretty much any job you had might be able to fulfill that. If your goal is to coach at the highest level possible, then there's a whole nother strategy of which jobs you should take. And those jobs should prepare you and help you gain the experience necessary to get a job that is maybe your long-term goal of getting the job at a high level. And something else to consider when you're making those goals, and you're trying to decide on what jobs, if you, most likely you're going to be going into an assistant coaching job first. You usually don't start out as a head coach, and who you coach for is really important to your development as a coach and to your opportunities as a coach. If your goal is to climb the ladder in coaching and try to get to the highest level possible, we've already talked about the fact that you want to look towards coaches that maybe are doing the same thing, but they're a little bit ahead of you in that process. For example, a young coach that's an up and comer that has, been winning and moving up. That's a really good person maybe to see if you can work with them. If you are associated with winning programs, your opportunities to get jobs at higher levels increase. And so when you start out as an assistant coach, you're not going to have as much impact as you would like to have on the whole team to control that. And so you want to make sure that you're strategic with the jobs that you apply for, if that is your goal to get to the top, and get to the highest level. So remembering what your short-term goals are as a coach, remembering what your long-term goals are as a coach, and then everything that goes into that, those are considerations when you apply for a job. And not every job is a good job. You might There might be challenges, and there are challenges with every job. And some of those challenges are the ones that you want to deal with, and other jobs have challenges that you don't want to deal with. Sometimes high school jobs where maybe the administration is not very supportive of athletics. We have high schools in our county that have no full-time coaches and very little support, and it's no surprise those programs really struggle. And so for a coach, a high school coach that's maybe trying to become a high school coach at one of the high schools that is more successful, that might be a tough job to leave and move up to. Um, and so you have to keep that into perspective. And I think that's really important to your development and to your journey as a coach. You don't want to waste time. You want to try to figure out where you want to go and have that plan, so that you're not wasting time going in a different direction. Okay. Again, we want to keep everything in alignment. And this process is really one that's repeated over and over and over with coaching. Here's where we are, here's where we want to go, here's the steps to take us there. Okay. And all these steps need to be in line with where we're going so that we can be as efficient as possible. And we're not wasting any time. Okay. So, there's been many jobs that, I've considered over the years, and they weren't all good jobs. For example, when Sonoma State dropped football in 1996. I was coaching there. I was the defensive coordinator, and had a lot of responsibility there. In addition to just being the defensive coordinator, I taught classes. I was special teams coordinator. I did the off-season training, and jobs came available to me, but those jobs were, they were a long way from home. They were a long way from the life that I had, been creating here in Sonoma County. And I didn't want to take those jobs. Then I got into JC coaching, and over the years in JC coaching, I've been offered a couple of jobs at different junior colleges. And, I went and looked at them. I went and looked at the communities. I went and looked at the whole thing, and looked at the challenges and looked at the resources that were available. And at the end of the day, I made a decision that, I like the job I have a lot better than any of those other jobs. Where I am right now is where I believe I'm supposed to be. And so it's been a long time since I've considered another job, but earlier in my coaching career, I would consider lots of different jobs. I had aspirations of I wasn't a head coach at the time. And so I was applying for head coaching jobs at other junior colleges, and being courted by other junior colleges to come and coach there. But I still couldn't find one better than the job that I had, even as a defensive coordinator. So lo and behold, I'm still here. But having those opportunities, it's a blessing, but you also really need to do your homework. And through your coaching journey, it's important as early on as possible to figure out what are the most important things to you. And for me, the most important things for me was I like stability, and I like being in the same place, and I like this level, and I like this area. And so this is the place for me. So everybody else has to determine what the most important things to them are, when you decide you want to be a coach and you go through this process. So the assignment for this week, I'm going to talk briefly about that, and then I'm going to go into some tips and reminders to help you with the assignment. So this week's assignment is to go online and find a job announcement for a coaching position at the level you wish to coach at. There's lots of them out there. You might have a tough time finding one for an NFL team or a Major League Baseball team, but you'll be able to find something that's at least applicable. So I want everybody to find their own job announcement this week. And then I want you to, whatever kind of document you're doing your homework on, I want you to cut and paste the job requirements into your assignment. And we're going to have those in our assignment page so that we can refer to them. And that's going to be really important, as we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And then you're going to write a cover letter for that job, and you're going to create a resume for that job. And so that really is your assignment this week, or those 4 things. You're gonna find a job announcement. You're gonna cut and paste the requirements into your assignment so that I can see them also when you do your cover letter and your resume. And then we're gonna do a cover letter and a resume. And so we're gonna go through those 4 things and hopefully give you some insight so that your assignment will make sense to you and you'll get value out of it. I can tell you in my experiences over 30 plus years coaching college football and applying for many jobs over the years, your cover letter and your resume are things that constantly evolve. And even though you may not use a resume for a long time, having one, or at least an outline of one, really is helpful, because there's things you forget, and every time you look at it, you might add something to it or make an edit to it. But it's really important. You're trying to sum up who you are and what kind of person you are and what kind of coach you will be in a one-page resume or a one-page cover letter. And sometimes that's really hard to do. You know, it's a first impression on somebody. It's the first time they may ever hear your name or read your name and know anything about you. And so you want to take every step to make sure that your work is clean and it's representative of you the way you want to be perceived. And so I've been on every single hiring committee in our department at Santa Rosa Junior College for the last 20 years. And you're talking about, we hire 4 or 5 people a year, and those are full-blown committees where you interview 5 or 6 people. It's a whole process that takes sometimes months to complete. And so I've seen really great examples of cover letters and resumes, and I've seen some that were really, really poor. And so we're going to go through some of the characteristics of what makes one a good one and what makes one a not so good one in this lecture, and give you some tips and reminders for your assignment this week. So first off, the cover letter. Your cover letter is going to be something that really is a summary in written form. So it would be a few paragraphs, and I'll include in our assignment this week an example of, I'll send you one of my cover letters and one of my resumes. You can take a look at that for a job that I applied for some years ago, and give you some examples. But the cover letter really is going to be a summary of your resume, but it's a little different than your resume. It's a narrative about you. You know, hello, my name is Lenny Wagner, and you know, it's a story about your life, and it's the story you want them to read. It's the person you want them to know. And this is not a time to be shy about your accomplishments. And this is a time where you're going to try to grab them with a couple of paragraphs that are going to make them want to invest in you. And that's really important. You know, when you typically have a team and you're trying to get them to invest in you, everything's face to face and there's so many interactions. This is a one opportunity time to have somebody think they want to invest in you. And so you really need to take the time to do it right. Okay. And tell your story the way you want it to be told. And somewhere in that story, in your cover letter, needs to be that you're the best person for that job. And you're not just qualified. That's what a lot of people do, unfortunately. They say, I feel like I am qualified for this position because, well, everybody that they're going to interview is going to be qualified for the position, or they wouldn't interview them in the first place. You want to say, I'm not only qualified, but I am the best candidate for this position because, okay. And the because is going to be different, obviously, for everybody. But it's really important to find those things that you think can set you apart from somebody else, their life experiences, their experiences in other areas that maybe aren't coaching. Maybe you don't have a lot of coaching experience and you're just going to say, well, how can I be the best at this? There are other parts of your life where you've done similar things to coaching, at work, at home, um, taking care of younger brothers or sisters, things that you may not even think of, that are life experiences that are going to give you insight into how to interact with people in a positive way and how to be a leader. And so that cover letter is really important. And with all of anything that you write, and you submit for a job, whether it's a cover letter or a resume or it's the job application, you, if possible, have as many people read it as you can. Okay. If you have 5 people read your resume, 5 people will find 5 different little errors or things that they say, this doesn't make sense to me, or can you explain this a little better? You got to remember, not everybody that's going to be reading those applications is a coach. Okay. For many of the jobs that I've applied for over the years at junior colleges, the committee is the college president and the athletic director, who maybe was a coach of a different sport and didn't know football. And then you have other administrators on those committees that may not be sports people at all. And so being really clear with what you have in your cover letter and your resume and making sure it makes sense to people. So, I typically will have somebody that doesn't know anything about football read my information and make sure that all makes sense to them. So that way I can ensure that somebody that has never coached will look at that and they'll say, oh, okay, I can understand this and I can follow this. So job application, always, 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 always find a way to manipulate the document so that it's not handwritten. I hate to say this, but we still get handwritten job applications at the college level. And these people have master's degrees and sometimes doctorate degrees, and we get a handwritten application. And a lot of times those get tossed out right at the beginning. Like if we have 10 people applying for a job and we're trying to cut it down to interview 6, if there's 2 or 3 handwritten applications in there, those sometimes just go out immediately before we even start looking at them, because it shows that somebody didn't take the time to figure out how to get that in there the right way, so it's nice and neat and is representative of your work. If you get something that looks sloppy, you're probably going to get a sloppy candidate, and so you have to be aware of that. So job starts with the job application, then the cover letter. Everything should be very neatly organized. The cover letter should be 1 page at the most. Sometimes it could be just a paragraph or 2. But again, multiple eyes on your information. And your resume, same thing. Okay, so those are some general tips and reminders. Okay, getting more specific into these, items. It's really important when you start with the job description. Okay, the job description really is going to be what is going to lead your cover letter and what is going to lead your resume. I would really caution you guys to just have like 1 resume and 1 cover letter and send it out to mass quantities of people. Um, People reading those can usually tell, and because there's real generic words in there and stuff like that. Um, get to know the job description and the job announcement, okay, as best you can. Even if you need to call people and find information out, you want to investigate this job that you're about to apply for as much as possible. And for jobs that I've applied for, that I've interviewed for, I've taken trips to those colleges. I've went and talked to people in financial aid. I've went and talked to people in admissions. I've went and talked to people in the scholarship office. I've went and talked to other coaches in that department. And then when I got to my interview or I was writing up my resume, being able to talk about things that are specific to those places really makes a big difference. And it shows that you've done some homework. So for example, in my cover letter, I might say something that I have great experience in helping place junior college athletes to 4-year universities. And I noticed when I was researching your campus that you have a college transfer center, and I really look forward to working with John Johnson in the transfer center on ways that we can partner with our student athletes to help them matriculate to four-year university. So right there, in just like those two sentences, I've shown a couple things. I've shown that you know, I'm looking for resources that maybe already exist that maybe haven't been tapped into yet. I'm looking, I've already made contact with somebody. I'm familiar with their campus and how things work there. And I've already got a plan. You know, I'm coming into this with a plan, you know, and I'm going to go investigate all those areas that I think are important to my program. And I'm going to have ammo in my cover letter and in my resume that is specific right to those things. Okay. That's part of it. The other part of getting to know the job description is understanding the terminology that they use. Okay. For example, some colleges will say, please describe your plan for matriculation of your student athletes. And another application might say, please describe your plan for college transfer of your student athletes. Okay. And another one might say, please tell us your plan to keep your athletes moving forward academically. Okay. Those three things pretty much mean the same thing. Okay. But when at all possible, in your cover letter and in your resume, use the same words they use. Okay. So if it's, you know, here is the necessary experience for this job, and it says experience with matriculation of student athletes. Well, then in your resume, you want to say the same thing. You don't want to say college transfer of student athletes. You could, it would still be accurate. Okay. But if somebody's reading resumes and trying to check off the boxes of the requirements and the job description, because that's what you do. You get the resume, you get the cover letter, you sit there with the job description and the job announcement, and you check off, okay, they have this, they have this, they have this, they have this, they have this. And the easier it is for those people to find that, the better off you're going to be, and the better grade you're going to get when they are ranking candidates to interview. So definitely get to know that job description, get to know that job announcement as best you can. Use that verbiage and make it specific to that job. Your cover letter, your resume, okay? They need to be specific. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten cover letters that say, hello, my name's John, such and such, and I'm excited to apply for the job at West Valley College. And they didn't proofread it. It was an old resume, an old cover letter that they used for another job. And instead of saying Santa Rosa Junior College, they missed that. Well, guess what? That one's probably out. Okay. They didn't take the time to go through their information. Okay. Their cover letter was not specific to Santa Rosa Junior College. Their resume was not specific to the job announcement. They're just throwing all these resumes out there. And so, you know, you could have some success doing that, but when there's a job that's a highly sought after job, those applications, the cover letters and the resumes are picked through with a fine-tooth comb. And you need to make sure that you have addressed all the information in the job announcement if you can. So that kind of brings me up to my next tip and reminder on this. When you're doing your resume, there's going to be some times that you apply for a job and it will say, we want these experiences, or these, we want you to possess these abilities. And maybe it's something that says like administrative experience or head coaching experience. Okay. Maybe you've never been a head coach. Okay. And so you say, well, how can I show them that I possess the skills to be a head coach? And there may be other areas in your life, as I mentioned before, like maybe at your work, you're a manager. Maybe at your house, you're having to, you know, run the house. Maybe you have children, and you know, you've done things where you've been in charge of groups of people, where you've had to have a plan, where you started at A and you did B, C, D, and you ended up at E. You know, that's what coaches do. We cast a vision, we gain buy-in, we have a plan, and then we execute the plan. And so you've done that. Many of you have done that in other areas of your life. And so sometimes we need to pull on those life experiences in our cover letter and our resume to say that maybe we don't have this exact thing that you're looking for, okay, but I have this, okay, and that's better than putting I have no experience in this, okay. And so you need to be creative sometimes and think of it, times when you know, you've done things that were similar to that. You know, maybe you were a captain on every team that you were on. Well, that says something about your leadership ability. Um, you know, things like that, you know, you were involved in, you know, honors classes, and or you have a job doing this where you know, similar, you dealt with lots of different people. So you really need to be creative with this when you're starting out and you're lacking content for your resume and and your cover letter. Um, so it is really important, I think, that you guys be creative as much as you can, and find like experiences that you've been successful with that you can um, put down in your resume and your cover letter. And some of you may have lots of experience already, and then that's going to be really easy to do, to list those. But lots of times we don't have the exact stuff, and so it requires us to do that. Um, so again, with any resume or cover letter, the more eyes, the better. And you want this to be very neat and tidy, specific to the job, specific to the job announcement and the requirements that are in there. And so that's why I'm having you paste the job description and the requirements for the job in your assignment, so that as you're doing your cover letter and as you're doing your resume, you can look back up there and refer to those and complete the assignment the right way. So once you get your resume in, you get your cover letter in, and then you're lucky enough to get an interview. And sometimes, you know, I hate to say it, but most hirings are like a lot of things in life. There's influence, and sometimes influence can get into that committee or into a person on that committee. And sometimes that influence can be really helpful, and sometimes it can be not so helpful. Um, if you know somebody on the hiring committee, or you know somebody that knows somebody on a hiring committee, or sometimes it's even, you know, somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that's on the hiring committee, um, that's part of your investigation of that job. You want to know who's making the decisions. If I get lucky enough to get an interview, who's going to be on that committee? And then I'm going to get to know about those people. For example, when you know, I've gone into interviews and there might be 5 or 6 people there, and I know something about each one of them, about what their job is. And I might say something like, "Oh, hello, Kathy. It's really nice to meet you. I noticed that you're in charge of the Student Athletic Success Center, and I'm really looking forward to working with you with our student athletes. I've got some great ideas, and I know you guys have a great program already, but I want to talk to you about maybe some ways we could implement some new things." You know, that conversation starts that way. She knows now that I've done research about what she does. Again, I'm showing I have a plan, right? I'm showing that I've already thought about all this stuff. And so preparing for the interview is a lot like preparing for writing your resume. It's about doing your homework, and it's about, you know, going in there with ammo. Okay. But you got to do your homework, and the more you can find out about committee members, what they do, you know, and how you can interact with them in a positive way. Again, now you got past the first impression of the paper screening. Now it's your first face-to-face interaction. And what are you trying to get out of that? And what do you, you know, you want that to go well. And so we're going to go into some tips and reminders here for the interview. So do your homework first off. Okay. And then before you ever interview, before you ever look at questions, think long and hard about what are all the things that I would like these people to know about me. Okay. Without thinking about questions, just think like, okay, well, why am what makes me the best person for this job? And what life experience can make me the best person for this job? What coaching experience can make me the best person for this job? What are all the things, literally, if you were going to tell a story, and so let's say you have an hour interview, okay, you've got an hour to tell your story, okay, you should be able to tell your story and use that amount of time, and make sure you get every bit of that story that you want in there. Okay, so you already have all these ideas predetermined in your head of things that you think are important for that job that you want them to know about you. Okay, then once you get the interview, or once you get the questions for the interview, or once they start asking you the questions to the interview, sometimes they give you the questions before, and let you look at them for 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes there's they just say, show up and we're just going to fire questions at you. But you need to know before you ever enter that room exactly what you want to tell them about yourself. And then the trick is then to fit that information within the questions that they ask you. Coaching interview questions are pretty similar. One of them is going to be, why are you the best person for the job? There's going to be some type of question about conflict resolution, like, and they want to know how you're going to deal with a potential conflict that may come up with a fellow coach, a player coach, a parent coach, and they want to see your problem solving. So they're going to look for some situation that they're going to ask you about, probably, where things didn't go your way and how did you respond to that. They might ask you logistical questions about, tell us about your off season or your training regimen. They might ask you about recruiting, what's your recruiting plan. They're going to ask you about, what are your team rules, they might say, or what do you do if a player misses practice? What do you do if a player gets arrested? So you kind of like have all this ammo way before you ever see the questions, and you just think of these things. And just about every single interview I've ever been on included those areas that I just mentioned. And then once in a while, there'll be a teaching demonstration or a coaching demonstration. And in those situations, again, it's really important to remember that those committee members might not be football coaches. And so if you're going to do a coaching demonstration, you want to try to pick something that you think the majority of those people are going to understand, and not something so complex, X's and O's wise, that it just confuses them. Okay, this is your opportunity to show that you're a great communicator. You're going to have to communicate this plan to your players. You're going to have to communicate this plan to your coaches. And so communicating it to some strangers in a room, it's really important. So keep it simple. Okay, you don't have to get too elaborate with that. They just want to see a structure, and they want to see that you can teach. Again, keep that part of it simple, but be prepared for that. Okay, and so when you again, you're just kind of like putting away ammunition, so that when you go in there, you have all this stuff to just refer to and draw from. So there's no question that they could possibly ask you that could stump you, because you've thought of all these scenarios. And I think maybe some insight from this class might help too. But questions to me, interviews are, I like being interviewed. It's not stressful to me, because I know I have an answer to every single one of their questions, and there's no question that can stump me in coaching, because the answers to the questions are your life experiences. And so if you're drawing from things that are from your heart and that are from within inside you, there's no answer that will stump any of you. Okay, and so that gives you a sense of confidence going into an interview that's really important as well. You're the leader, you're the head coach, or you're an assistant coach, and you need to give off a presence of confidence and leadership. And having all that ammunition and kind of knowing what you're going to do, it's your game plan. It's your game plan. We're looking ahead. What are the potential challenges? What are going to be the responses to these things? And then how am I going to respond? And then how are they going to, it's the same. It's the same plan. Okay, and so as we are putting that ammo in for that interview, it's all those things. Okay, and we're just going to have them there ready, so that even if you didn't see the questions before, you would feel comfortable answering them and have an idea of what you're going to say. That's really important. And as you're answering questions, with the committee, it's really important that, again, you try to make a connection with as many of the committee members as possible, through, like I said, research about that person, but also remembering their names. And when they ask, sometimes they take turns asking questions, and you might say, I really appreciate that question, John. In my experiences, this is what I've done. And so there's that, again, that's talking to somebody and using their name. Again, it says something about you. Okay. And they're going to remember that, because not every candidate's going to do that. It's going to say, wow, that guy remembered my name and knew that right now on our football team that we got a young team. Sometimes candidates come in to do their homework and they'll say, hey, coach, having a good season this year. I saw you guys just had a big win last week. And I kind of like that. And they might say, oh yeah, there's the swim coach, great job last year winning the state championship. That shows that's that relationship skills kind of you're starting to have a conversation, you're connecting, and that's really, really important. So using them, but using their name when referring to them, making great eye contact with them. Sometimes in a committee, when you're doing an interview, they have to take notes, and they may not be looking at you. They may be just staring at their paper and writing while you're talking. And sometimes that can be stressful because you're not sure if they're listening. And so, if you can, having great eye contact, and if all your answers are coming from within you and they're experiences that you've already thought about, they should flow out pretty easily, to where you're not having to look at notes and things like that, where you can just literally have a conversation with them, answering the questions. It is nice to have the questions in front of you, because if you're like me, sometimes I get rolling on something and then I have to circle back to the question. And if you forget the question and don't answer it, that's not good. So it is good to have the questions in front of you. Usually they'll provide you with them. And so as you are answering a question and maybe you start getting off on a tangent, it's always important to look back and see what the question was one more time and make sure you answered that specific question. It's like giving a speech in your speech class. Okay. You're going to kind of tell them what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about it. Then you're going to tell them what you talked about, and reinforce those points. And so you would say, you'd go through you'd answer the question. And then at the end of the question, you might say, so to really answer your question, it's these points, and you go back to that, you reinforce that, make sure they know that you answered the questions. I can't tell you how many people that we've interviewed that don't answer questions. They get going and they get on a tangent and they get off subject and they never circle back. And so when we have to evaluate them and say, okay, what score are we going to give them on answer number 5 or question number 5? And everyone says, well, they didn't even answer that. Then that's a 0. And that person may have had a great answer somewhere inside of them. And maybe they just didn't, they got lost when they started going off on a tangent and didn't circle back to that question. And so having those questions to just refer to make sure, before you move on to the next question, just double check and say, okay, I answered that one. Okay. And so as you go through the interview process, you want to make sure you're time conscious. Typically with our interviews, we'll say something like, this is going to be a 60-minute interview. You've got 8 questions, got approximately 8 minutes per question. And we have a timer over here. And when you get to 1 minute, we'll let you know. Okay. Interviews where you ramble on, or interviews where you don't say enough, are usually not successful. Sometimes we do an interview and somebody will answer the questions in like 1 minute, and 15 minutes into the interview, we're done and we're supposed to go for an hour. And I think those people oftentimes leave, and as soon as the door shuts, they go, man, I didn't say all of this stuff. Use your time. Okay. Don't ramble, but use your time. Okay. This is your opportunity. And if you get done with your interview early, okay, this is going to be a nice segue into one of my last tips and reminders here for the interview. It's one of the reasons why you don't want to use all of your time Okay, because if they tell you we've got 60 minutes, at 60 minutes, they probably have another candidate coming in. And so if you have questions, they may not have time for those. So you might want to ask this at the beginning of the interview, like, if they don't mention it, is there going to be an opportunity for me to ask you guys some questions at the end of this interview? And most of the time they will say yes. And that's huge. Okay, because now it's your turn to flip the table on them. Now you get to interview them. Okay. And so again, doing great homework and having some great questions for them specific to the people that are on the committee before you interview. At some point, they're going to tell you who the committee members are. Okay. And when you get that information, that's when you need to dial it in and start getting to know as much as you can about those people and have questions for them that are specific to them and what they do. And those go a long way. Okay. Again, it's showing that you're doing homework. It's showing that you are already have put potential hurdles on your radar and you're saying, okay, I've thought about what the challenges might be at this particular job, and I'm already looking for resources to solve these problems. And having insight into that is really important. And so having your list of questions, I like to ask that question, and then at the end of the interview they'll say, okay, do you have any questions for us? And then usually I'll like open up a folder and go, yes, matter of fact, I do. Yeah, John, so can you tell me a little bit about your athletic training program and how that works with our student athletes? How much access do they have to the training room? Do we have trainers at practice? Do we have a team doctor? If you could outline that for me, that'd be really helpful. Oh, Mary over there, you're the administrative assistant for athletics. Well, how does that work with, when we need grade reports, we need things like that? Is that something that I'm going down the list with each one of them and having questions for them. And again, that's showing that I've done some homework and that I'm willing to do homework. Okay. It says something about the fact that this job is important to me. When you're in that interview, you want that committee to believe wholeheartedly that this job is the most important thing to you, because that's what they're looking for. They want somebody that's going to make it important to them because they want a good candidate, somebody that's going to work hard, that it's going to be important to. And when you ask questions and you do homework and you go the extra mile to set yourself apart from other candidates, that's what that says to them. Okay. And so you really want to do that. And right now there's a lot of jobs out there. Okay. But there's also a lot of competition for the best jobs. And sometimes it's really little things that set people apart, and so you really, if you get lucky enough to get selected for an interview, you need to be ready for that. Don't go in there without preparing, and because you have one shot. And then unfortunately, sometimes, fortunately and unfortunately, your performances are remembered. Okay. So if you go into an interview and you stink it up, and then you're applying for a job somewhere else, well, somebody at that other place might call the other place and say, hey, I know such and such applied for that job. Why didn't they get it? And that person might say, well, I can't tell you because it's confidential, or it might not be a job that's confidential, and they might be able to tell you stuff. And then they might say stuff like, well, we didn't really like this or that or whatever. Or on the flip side, it could be, oh man, that person was great. It was so close, and just, man, we loved them, but we just had one position and this other person was just a little better. Boy, that says a lot, right? So that's really important that you put your best effort out there. And then, as I mentioned, when you're doing your homework with the committee members, and I talked a little bit about influence. Influence happens, and it's a real thing. And so having somebody that's influential make a phone call for you to a committee member, or maybe the person that's going to ultimately making the decision, can really go a long way. If for jobs that I've applied for, I've had, my JC coach, my college coach make calls for me. And if it was a JC job and my JC coach called these other schools, that carried some serious amount of weight. My JC coach was the winningest football coach in all of football when I played for him, and was very, very well respected across the state in the United States. Was also the athletic director, was also the dean of different parts of the school. So that guy making a call for you, and may call somebody they know on a committee and says, hey, this person's legit, and I'm endorsing this person, that says a ton. It really does. Sometimes I've had college presidents make phone calls for me, and so when I applied for the job at Santa Rosa, one of the references that I had was the college president at Mendocino College, and that college president knew the college president at Santa Rosa, made a phone call to people on the committee, and that made a huge difference. The reality is those people aren't going to make phone calls for you if they don't believe in you. And so you have to do a good job at every job. You have to do a good job as a player if you're going to one day want that coach to write you a letter or make a phone call for you. And so, having those resources is really important, but they don't come easy. They come through hard work and sacrifice at whatever job you have right now or whatever interaction you're going to have with that person. But influence definitely happens, and it happens both ways. And committee members will also do their homework. Okay, if we're hiring a person and I know they worked at another college where I know somebody, I'm going to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, Joe, you worked with this person for the last 5 years. What do you think? How do they interact in your department? What are they good at? What are they not so good at? I'm going to find out as much information as I can, because if I'm going to hire somebody that's going to potentially share an office with me or be in the department with me for 10 or 15 years, I want a quality candidate. I want a quality candidate for our students. So, man, everybody's doing their homework. Okay. And if you don't for the interview, then you really are setting yourself behind. You have to have a plan. And that's being a coach. You need a plan for everything, whether it's pregame meals, the meal at halftime, traveling to your game, getting sponsorship, getting uniforms, the 2-point play at the end of the game, the corner kick at the end of the game. Whatever it is, you have to have a plan, and you never want to be unprepared. And that's one of the things about coaching that I think it really forces you to become an organized individual. If you stay in it, if you're able to stay in it, you're going to have to get organized. You're going to have to really be a forward thinker, and so those same skills are going to help you in the interview process. At the end of the interview, you're going to thank everybody. You're going to either shake their hand or give them knuckles, whatever that is. With COVID, who knows what that is, but it may be a handshake, it may be just a wave. If it's a handshake, this sounds crazy, but make it a good handshake, and a confident handshake. And it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever. Typically handshakes are firm, and we're going to reach in and we're going to get a good grasp, and we're going to look them in the eye, and we're going to say, thank you. It was nice to meet you. I really look forward to hearing from you soon. I've seen people not get jobs because of a bad handshake. And that may sound ridiculous to you, but it's real. Some people are old school, and a handshake means a lot. And a handshake with a limp hand when you're staring at your shoe tops, as opposed to reach in, give them a good grasp, look them in the eyes, it's very different to most people. And so, believe it or not, that's a big deal. At the end of the interview, some eye contact, thanking them, solid handshake if that's what they're doing at that time. And you just want to be first class from the moment you walk in that door to the moment you walk out, and have nothing that they could say, I really didn't like that. So that's going to require a lot of work, and it's going to require a lot of homework, and sometimes even practicing. There's been jobs where I've thought about those things that I wanted to tell them, and then I would just go in a room by myself and start telling stories about my life or about my experiences, so that I would have thoughts that were familiar that would go together when I started saying those things, and it wouldn't be uncomfortable, or it wouldn't be, um, it would be smooth, and in my delivery. So I think you do that with anytime you're going to say, hey, here's our game plan for this week, or here's my game plan for this interview. I think it's a process that is systematic, and it helps me going through that systematic approach to where I can check off the boxes, and I can know and have confidence that I'm prepared because I've checked all the boxes. Sometimes you may not know what all the boxes are, but that's where you really got to be thinking, and try to be a forward thinker and say, are we ready for this? Are we ready for that? And then through interviews, you're going to have interviews where maybe you didn't perform at your best. And just like any performance with your team, there's value in that. Okay. There's value in that big time, because you're going to know where you need to spend more time. You're going to know where you need more, maybe experience, or where you need to just polish up your answers a little bit, to be better at the next one. And so it's really important to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, where did I come up short in this job? And sometimes you did everything right, and you had everything, all the boxes checked, and that's that example that I described, where somebody calls and said, hey, this person applied, how come they didn't get it? And you go, oh man, it was so close. They were both great. We had great candidates, and we just had a really hard time deciding. And if we had two jobs, we would have hired this person. um, so even if you don't get it, there's still value in that. And so it's really like your team. You want to acknowledge the successes, and you want to improve on the areas where you fell short. um, so I have some links for you guys that are going to be examples of some job announcements and some articles about strategies, when applying for jobs, and resumes and things like that, that will go along and coincide with the lecture this week. And I hope you'll get some value out of those. There's just 4 of them, and it's not a lot of reading. It's just a couple pages on each of them. But it also gives you some other resources that you can look to when you're doing your assignment this week. So again, to reiterate the assignment, and I'm going to be sending you guys an outline of what I talked about today in the assignment. But the assignment for this week is to find a job announcement for a coaching position at the level you want to coach. Cut and paste the job requirements and the job description into your assignment. Write a cover letter for that job, and create a resume for that job. And I'm going to include attachments of some examples for you to look at, and the links will also provide some examples for you to look at. And I have to say, I've really enjoyed reading your guys' assignments. It's if you guys were my team right now, um, you're doing a good job, and you're inspiring me to want to do even better job teaching, because I see that so many of you are really into the content, and you're taking the time to really give some well thought out answers to the questions that I've put out there for you guys. And so I'm looking forward to seeing your resumes and your cover letters and the job you're going to apply for. And when we get done, we're kind of when we get done with this portion of the class, we're going to get into some areas of, now we're interacting, and now we're getting ready to game plan, and now we're getting ready for games, and how are we dealing with things. And I'll be giving you guys some scenarios from my coaching career to help give you guys some perspective on things that might happen and ways you can deal with them. So I'm looking forward to get into that. But I think this section of the class is really important, because if you never get the job, all this other stuff doesn't matter. Okay. And so you got to get the job. And so I hope you'll take this section serious, even though it may not be one of the more fun topics of this class. But it is essential to get the job. And so we go through this practice so that when it does come time to do this, it won't be the first time you've done it. It might be that you've applied for many jobs, and usually the more you do that, the better you should get. Because if you're evaluating yourself, you're looking at where you fell short, then you should be improving with each job resume and each interview. So that's the goal. I thank you guys for listening. Again, apology for having this to you a day late. Oh, and just a remark about last week's video. My power went out right at the end of the video. So if it appears like it's cut off and you missed something, I was really just wrapping it up and our power went out. And so the video stopped recording. So there wasn't extra content on the end of that. If you thought maybe there was, and maybe it was your device, that was all me. So hope you have a great week. And as always, I look forward to reading your assignments, and go Bear Cubs.